October in Manhattan had a way of sneaking up on you. One day you were sweating through your shirt on the subway. The next you needed layers just to walk 2 blocks. Tonight fell somewhere in between. Cool enough to justify my leather jacket, but humid enough that I regretted wearing it indoors for the past 4 hours. I stood in the corner of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, camera pressed to my eye, capturing the final moments of the Children's Healthcare Foundation Gala. Through my viewfinder, I watched donors in silk gowns and tailored tuxedos bid farewell to one another, their laughter echoing off the vaulted ceiling decorated with crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my college education. My shutter clicked in rapid succession as I documented a socialite air-kissing another woman's cheeks, their expressions perfectly practiced for posterity. "That's a wrap, Collins," Jessica, the lead photographer, called out from across the ballroom. She was already packing up her equipment, her movements efficient after 15 years in the business. "Upload looks good. You can head out." I lowered my camera, feeling the familiar ache in my neck from holding the same position for hours. "Thanks. See you Thursday? Corporate headshots at 9. Don't be late." She flashed me a tired smile before returning to her gear. I made my way through the hotel's service corridor, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder. The contrast between the opulent ballroom and the stark, fluorescent-lit hallway always struck me. 2 worlds existing side by side, one meant to be seen, the other designed to remain invisible. I'd spent enough time in both to know which one felt more honest. The service exit opened onto a side street, and I was immediately hit with the reality that the temperature had dropped significantly since I'd arrived at 6. My breath formed small clouds in the air as I hurried toward the parking garage 2 blocks away. The streets were quieter now, just past 11 on a Tuesday night. Most of the city's workforce already home or heading there on packed subway cars. That's when the sky opened up. Within seconds, the light drizzle I'd noticed transformed into a downpour. Cold water soaked through my jacket, plastered my hair to my skull, made my camera bag feel twice as heavy. I broke into a run, cursing myself for parking so far away, trying to shield my expensive equipment from the worst of the rain. By the time I reached the garage, I was drenched. Water squelched in my boots with every step. I could feel my mascara running, probably giving me that raccoon look I'd perfected during my college crying over finals phase. At least no one was around to witness my drowned rat impression. I found my Honda on the 3rd level, a 12-year-old sedan that had seen better days, but got me from point A to point B without complaint. As I approached, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The passenger window was open. Not all the way. Just the 3 inches I'd left it cracked so Sunny wouldn't overheat while I worked. But now, in the downpour, rain was streaming inside. "No, no, no," I muttered, fumbling with my keys as I rushed to the door. I yanked it open, expecting to find my golden retriever's apologetic face, his fur damp from the moisture getting in. The car was empty. "Sunny?" I called, panic rising in my throat. I checked the back seat, under the seats, even popped the trunk, though I knew there was no way he could have gotten in there. "Sunny!" My hands shook as I spun around, scanning the parking garage. He must have pushed the window down further and squeezed through. But when? How long had he been gone? The gala had been 4 hours long. He could be anywhere in Manhattan by now. I left my camera bag on the passenger seat and took off running, back down the levels, out onto the street. The rain was relentless, making it nearly impossible to see more than 20 feet ahead. I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted his name, my voice nearly drowned out by thunder rumbling overhead. A flash of golden fur darted across the street 2 blocks down. Relief and terror flooded through me in equal measure. I sprinted after him, my boots splashing through puddles, water streaming into my eyes. I barely registered the honking cars as I ran into the crosswalk, my entire focus on that flash of gold. "Sunny!" I screamed as he disappeared around a corner. I rounded it seconds later, my lungs burning from the cold air and exertion, just in time to see him chasing something. A cat, sleek and black, weaving between pedestrians hurrying to get out of the rain. The cat darted left, toward a restaurant with a green awning, and Sunny followed without hesitation. I pushed myself harder, my legs protesting. "Sunny, stop!" The cat vanished into an alley. Sunny, bless his gentle heart, lost interest immediately. But instead of coming back to me, he did something completely inexplicable. He jumped into an open car door. Not just any car. A black SUV with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed money and power, parked directly in front of an Italian restaurant I'd photographed for a wedding client once. The restaurant catered to a very specific, very exclusive clientele. By the time I reached the vehicle, stumbling to a stop beside it, I could see Sonny through the open door, settling himself at someone's feet like he'd found exactly where he belonged. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, trying to catch my breath as I leaned into the SUV. "He's never done anything like this before. Sonny, come here, right now." Sonny looked at me, then looked up at whoever he was sitting with, and stayed exactly where he was. That's when I registered the interior of the vehicle. Leather seats the color of expensive cognac, the subtle scent of cedar and something else. Something that reminded me of the cologne counter at department stores I couldn't afford to shop at. And sitting in that back seat, looking at me with an expression somewhere between amusement and curiosity, was possibly the most striking man I'd ever seen. Dark hair, perfectly styled despite the late hour, a face that could have been carved from marble, all strong angles and sharp lines, except for his mouth, which was curved in the barest hint of a smile. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his broad shoulders, and even sitting down he radiated the kind of presence that made you want to either move closer or back away. I couldn't decide which, but it was his eyes that held me frozen, half in and half out of his vehicle, deep brown, almost black in the dim light, and looking at me with an intensity that made my rain-soaked skin break out in goosebumps. "Your dog?" His voice was low, smooth, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. "Yes. I'm so sorry. He escaped from my car and I've been chasing him and he never approaches strangers like this." I reached for Sonny's collar, but my dog pressed himself closer to the man's legs, deliberately out of my reach. "Sonny, I swear to God, if you don't come here right now, he seems comfortable." The man's hand, I noticed, had moved to rest lightly on Sonny's head. My dog's tail thumped against the expensive floor mats. I became acutely aware of how I must look. Soaking wet, mascara probably halfway down my face, shivering in the cold, half kneeling in this man's vehicle while my dog refused to obey me. Heat crept up my neck despite the chill. "He's really friendly," I said, as if that explained anything. "But he knows better than to jump into people's cars. I'm training him. I promise he's not usually so bold," the man suggested. "Poorly behaved," I finished, making another grab for Sonny's collar. This time I managed to get my fingers around it, but when I tried to pull him toward me, he planted himself like he weighed 300 pounds instead of 75. Behind me, I heard movement. I glanced back to see two large men in dark suits had materialized from somewhere. Security, I realized. Of course this man had security. One of them had his hand inside his jacket, and I didn't need much imagination to guess what he was reaching for. "I'm just getting my dog," I said quickly, my voice rising with nervousness. I'm not trying to. Marco." The man in the car spoke quietly, but the security guard immediately relaxed, stepping back. "It's fine. She's clearly just trying to retrieve her dog." The one called Marco nodded, but didn't move far. His eyes stayed locked on me, watching for any sudden movements. "Sonny, please," I tried again, putting more force into my pull on his collar. He whined at me, like I was the one being unreasonable. "What kind of dog is he?" the man asked, seemingly unbothered by the fact that a strange woman was half inside his vehicle, dripping water all over his floor. "Golden retriever, 2 years old. Usually very well behaved, I swear." I gave up on pulling and instead tried to maneuver myself into a better position, which resulted in me essentially climbing into the SUV. "I'm so sorry about this. And about the water. I'm getting everything wet. It's just water." He watched Sonny, who was now looking up at him with what I could only describe as adoration. "He trusts me. He doesn't know you. Dogs have good instincts about people." His gaze shifted from Sonny to me. "What's his name?" "Sonny. Because he's, well, golden." It seemed clever at the time. Why was I babbling? I pressed my lips together, trying to regain some composure. "And your name?" I hesitated. There was something about the way he asked, casual but deliberate, that made me wonder if he really just wanted to know, or if there was some other reason for the question. "Megan," I said finally. "Megan Collins." He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away. "I'm Franco." No last name offered. "Just Franco," said with the confidence of someone who didn't need to provide more context than that. I finally managed to get both hands on Sonny and, with significant effort, pulled him toward the door. He came reluctantly, his nails scraping against the floor mat, still looking back at Franco like I was taking him away from his new best friend. "I'm really sorry about this," I said again, backing out of the SUV with Sonny finally in my arms. The moment we were outside, he tried to lunge back toward the car. I tightened my grip, my wet hands slipping slightly on his damp fur. Franco leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You're soaked. It's raining." I meant it to sound obvious, but it came out more defensive than I intended. "Where's your car?" "Parking garage, 2 blocks that way." I gestured vaguely behind me. He looked past me, at the rain coming down in sheets, then at Sonny, who was still straining toward the SUV. "Let me give you a ride." "What?" No, that's not necessary, we're fine." "You're shivering." It wasn't a question, but an observation. "And your dog clearly doesn't want to walk in this weather. I can't just get in a stranger's car." The irony of saying this while having just climbed into his vehicle to retrieve my dog wasn't lost on me. We're not strangers anymore. You know my name. I know yours. And apparently we've been formally introduced by Sonny. That almost smile returned. "I'm offering a ride to a parking garage 2 blocks away, not asking you to trust me with your life." When he put it that way, it did seem absurd to refuse. And I was freezing, and Sonny weighed enough that carrying him 2 blocks in the rain was not an appealing prospect. "Just to the garage," I said, hating how uncertain I sounded. "Just to the garage," he confirmed. Marco moved to open the passenger door, and I realized Franco meant for me to sit up front. But Franco shook his head, gesturing to the back seat instead. "She'll sit here." I climbed in, this time deliberately, with Sonny in my lap. The moment I sat down, the warmth of the heated seat seeped through my wet clothes. Franco reached behind the driver's seat and produced a towel, dark gray and plush, which he handed to me. "For you or the dog, whichever needs it more." I used it on Sonny first, drying his face and ears while he squirmed with impatience. Only then did I press it to my own face, trying to salvage what was left of my dignity. Marco got into the driver's seat, another man I hadn't seen before climbing into the passenger seat. Neither spoke. Marco simply started the engine, waited for me to give directions, and pulled smoothly into the sparse traffic. The interior of the SUV smelled even better now that I wasn't panicking. Cedar, definitely, but also leather and something clean and crisp. The windows were tinted so dark I could barely see out, but I could feel the vehicle moving, hear the rain drumming against the roof. "You photograph events," Franco said. Not a question. I looked down at myself, at my camera bag still hanging across my body, the strap dark with water. "How did you know?" "The bag. The way you hold yourself. You have the posture of someone who spends a lot of time on their feet, watching rather than participating." He paused. "And there was a gala tonight at the plaza. You're dressed for behind-the-scenes work, not attendance." I didn't know whether to be impressed or unsettled by his observational skills. "Children's healthcare benefit. I'm a freelance photographer." "You enjoy it?" "Most of the time. The hours are unpredictable and the pay isn't great, but I like capturing moments people want to remember." I realized I was still holding the towel and folded it carefully, not wanting to hand it back to him while it was damp with dog water. "What about you? What do you do?" "I have various business interests." Vague, deliberately so. Import, export, real estate. Nothing as interesting as photography. Somehow I doubted that. Everything about Franco, from his vehicle to his security, to the way he carried himself, suggested his business interests were very interesting indeed, just not in ways he wanted to discuss with strangers. We'd already traveled 1 block. I could see the parking garage entrance ahead. Sonny, traitor that he was, had migrated from my lap back to Franco's feet, settling there like it was the most natural thing in the world. Franco didn't push him away. His hand rested on Sonny's head again, absently scratching behind one ear in exactly the spot my dog loved. "He really likes you," I observed, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "He's usually nervous around new people. It takes him time to warm up. I had a dog once, a long time ago, also a golden retriever." Something crossed Franco's face, there and gone so quickly I almost missed it. Something that looked like grief. What was their name? His name was Apollo. The past tense hung heavy in the air. "He died when I was 15. I'm sorry. I meant it." Anyone who'd loved and lost a dog understood that particular kind of heartbreak. It was a long time ago, He said it like repetition would make it true. The SUV pulled into the parking garage, and Marco navigated to the third level without needing further directions from me. When we reached my Honda, looking even more pathetic next to the luxury vehicle, Marco put the SUV in park, but didn't turn off the engine. "Thank you," I said, opening the door. This time, Sonny came with me without protest, though he looked back at Franco with those soulful eyes that usually earned him extra treats. "Really, I appreciate the ride, and I'm sorry again about him jumping in your car like that. No apology necessary." Franco's dark eyes held mine for a moment longer. "Drive safely, Megan Collins. The roads are slick tonight." I closed the door and hurried to my car, Sonny trotting beside me, apparently having exhausted his rebellious streak for the evening. As I fumbled with my keys, my hands still shaking from cold and adrenaline, I heard the SUV's engine rumble as it drove away. Inside my car, I sat for a moment, processing what had just happened. My dog had jumped into a stranger's vehicle. That stranger had been kind about it, given me a ride, and had somehow managed to make the entire bizarre situation feel almost normal. I glanced at Sonny, who was already settled in the passenger seat, looking pleased with himself. "What was that about?" I asked him. His tail wagged, and he had absolutely no answers for me. I started the car, turned the heat on full blast, and began the drive back to my apartment in Queens. But as I merged onto the street, I couldn't shake the image of Franco's face when he'd mentioned Apollo, or the way Sonny had looked at him like he'd found something he'd been searching for. Whatever had just happened, I had the strangest feeling it wasn't over. 3 days passed before I saw Franco again. Though that wasn't entirely accurate, I thought about him more than I cared to admit, about the way Sonny had refused to leave his side, about the grief that had flickered across his face when he mentioned Apollo, about how his security detail had materialized from nowhere, suggesting he was someone far more important than a man with vague business interests in import and export. I tried to push those thoughts aside as I prepared for the Henderson wedding in the Hamptons. It was my biggest booking in months, a full-day shoot for a couple whose combined family wealth could probably buy a small country. The bride had been very specific about wanting a photographer who could capture candid moments, not just pose shots, which meant I'd be moving through the crowd all day, practically invisible while documenting their celebration. The drive out to the Hamptons took nearly 3 hours on Saturday morning, traffic heavy with weekend escapees fleeing the city. I'd left Sonny with my neighbor, Mrs. Park, who adored him and spoiled him with treats I couldn't afford. He'd been acting strange since Tuesday night, sitting by the door at odd hours, whining softly like he was waiting for someone. I'd chalked it up to the excitement of his brief adventure, but part of me wondered if he was looking for Franco. The wedding venue was exactly what I'd expected. A sprawling estate with manicured lawns rolling down to a private beach, white tents billowing in the ocean breeze, flowers everywhere in shades of cream and blush. The kind of place that existed in a completely different universe from my Queens apartment with its temperamental radiator and neighbor who played bass at 2 a.m. I arrived early to scout locations and test lighting, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder as I moved through the property. The wedding coordinator, a woman named Patricia who spoke in clipped, efficient sentences, walked me through the day's schedule. Ceremony at 4, cocktail hour on the terrace at 5, reception in the main tent at 6:30. "The guest list is very exclusive," Patricia informed me, her tone suggesting I should be impressed. "Several notable families from the city. The Hendersons wanted someone who could be discreet." I assured her discretion was part of my job description, which seemed to satisfy her. She left me to set up, and I spent the next 2 hours positioning myself strategically, planning angles, making notes about how the light would shift as the afternoon progressed. By the time guests began arriving, I'd transformed into my professional mode. Camera raised, eye to the viewfinder, I became part of the background. People rarely noticed the photographer after the first few minutes, which was exactly how I preferred it. I could observe without being observed, capture genuine moments when people forgot they were being watched. The ceremony was beautiful in that effortless way money could buy. The bride wore a gown that probably cost more than my car. The groom looked properly emotional as she walked down the aisle, and the sun cooperated by painting everything in golden light. I moved through the crowd, my shutter clicking steadily, building the narrative of their day frame by frame. It was during cocktail hour that I saw him. I was crouched beside a flower arrangement, trying to capture a candid shot of the bride's grandmother, when someone moved into my peripheral vision. Tall, commanding presence, dark suit that fit perfectly. Something about the way he carried himself made me lower my camera and look directly at him. Franco stood near the bar, a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand, deep in conversation with an older man I didn't recognize. He hadn't seen me yet, and I took the opportunity to study him in this different context. He looked the same as he had Tuesday night, that same controlled elegance. But here, surrounded by the wealthy and powerful, he didn't stand out. He blended perfectly, which somehow made him more intriguing. This was his world, I realized. These were his people, as if sensing my gaze. He turned his head and our eyes met across the crowded terrace. Recognition flashed in his dark eyes, followed by something that might have been pleasure. He said something to his companion, then began moving through the crowd toward me. I straightened quickly, suddenly self-conscious about my casual black pants and long-sleeve shirt, my camera hanging around my neck like a neon sign announcing I didn't belong here. Megan Collins. He stopped in front of me, that almost smile playing at his lips. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm working. Photographing the wedding. I gestured unnecessarily at my camera. I didn't know you'd be here either. Family friend of the groom's father. I couldn't decline the invitation. His gaze moved over me, assessing but not inappropriate. How's Sonny? The fact that he remembered my dog's name sent an unexpected warmth through my chest. He's good. Still acting a little strange, though. I think his adventure Tuesday night affected him more than I realized. Strange how? He keeps sitting by the door. Waiting for something, I think. I paused, debating whether to say more. Or someone. Something shifted in Franco's expression, a softening around his eyes. Dogs remember kindness. He probably associates me with getting out of the rain and finding somewhere warm. Maybe. I didn't mention that Sonny had been in dozens of cars before, and never acted the way he had with Franco. Are you enjoying the wedding? The ceremony was beautiful. The bride's dress was particularly impressive. He said it with just enough sincerity that I couldn't tell if he actually cared or was simply making conversation. You're capturing it well. I saw you during the ceremony. You have a good eye for moments. You were watching me work? The idea made me strangely self-conscious. I was watching the wedding. You happened to be part of it. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine. Tell me about Sonny. You mentioned he was rescued? The shift in topic caught me off guard. Yes. From a shelter in Brooklyn about 6 months ago. He was scheduled to be euthanized in 2 days when I found him. I felt that familiar tightness in my throat thinking about how close I'd come to never meeting Sonny. His previous family abandoned him when they moved to an apartment that didn't allow dogs. They just left him tied to a pole outside the shelter with a note. Franco's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. People can be cruel. They can. But he's happy now. Spoiled even. I adjusted my camera strap, needing something to do with my hands. What about Apollo? You said he died when you were 15. What happened? For a long moment, I didn't think he'd answer. His gaze moved past me, toward the ocean visible beyond the tents, and something painful crossed his face. There was a fire at our summer house. He woke me up, barking, scratching at my door. By the time I got out, the whole first floor was engulfed. His voice was carefully controlled, each word measured. He went back inside. I was trying to get back in too when the firefighters arrived and held me back. They found him later near my mother's room. He'd been trying to reach her. My chest constricted. Franco, I'm so sorry. My mother was already dead. Heart attack in her sleep. She never knew about the fire. But Apollo, he tried to save her anyway. He looked back at me. His expression shuddered now. I was 15. I blamed myself for years, thinking if I'd gotten to him faster, if I'd been able to pull him out. It wasn't your fault. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't always override emotion. He finished his whiskey in one swallow. I haven't had a dog since. Couldn't bring myself to risk that kind of loss again. We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the cocktail hour washing over us. Laughter, clinking glasses, string quartet playing something classical. Here we were, surrounded by celebration, discussing grief and loss. Collins, Jessica's voice cut through the moment. She was waving at me from across the terrace, pointing at her watch. We need you for the family formals. I turned back to Franco, suddenly reluctant to end this conversation. I have to go. Work calls. Of course. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, different from the one he'd given me before. This one had his name, a phone number, and an address in the financial district. I have a business proposition for you. Corporate photography work. Are you available this week? I took the card, surprised. What kind of corporate work? Headshots for our website. Some office photos. Nothing elaborate, but I'd rather hire someone I know can deliver quality work. He paused. And someone whose dog showed excellent judgment and character. Despite everything, I smiled. Using Sonny as a reference, he seemed like a good judge of character. That almost smile appeared again, transforming his face in a way that made my pulse quicken. Are you interested? I should have been more cautious. Should have questioned why a man with his obvious resources would hire a freelance photographer he'd met under bizarre circumstances 3 days ago. But the pragmatic part of my brain was already calculating how much I could charge for corporate work. How that would help with my perpetually tight budget. Yes, I'm interested. Good. Call my office Monday morning. We'll set up a time. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost old-fashioned. Enjoy the rest of the wedding, Megan. He disappeared back into the crowd before I could respond, leaving me standing there with his business card in my hand and a strange flutter in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. The rest of the wedding passed in a blur of activity. I photographed the family formals, the grand entrance, the first dance, the cake cutting, but part of my mind kept returning to Franco, to the pain in his voice when he'd talked about Apollo, to the way he'd looked at me like he was seeing something beyond just a photographer doing her job. By the time I packed up my equipment at 11 that night, exhausted and with a memory card full of images, I'd convinced myself I was reading too much into a simple business transaction. Franco needed a photographer. I needed work. That was all this was. Monday morning, I called the number on his card. A woman answered, professional and efficient. Pellegrini Imports. Hi, I'm calling about a photography booking. Franco asked me to call. There was a brief pause. Your name? Megan Collins. One moment, Ms. Collins. I was put on hold, listening to classical music that probably cost someone a licensing fee. Then a different voice came on the line. Male, younger than Franco. Ms. Collins, this is Vincent Rossi, Mr. Pellegrini's assistant. He mentioned you'd be calling. Are you available Thursday afternoon for a session at our offices? Yes, Thursday works. Excellent. 2 o'clock? The address is on the card he gave you. Please bring equipment for both indoor and outdoor shots. We'll need approximately 20 headshots and some general office photography. We discussed logistics, pricing, technical requirements. Vincent was all business, nothing like Franco's measured warmth. When I hung up, I had a job that would pay more than I usually made in 2 weeks, scheduled for 3 days from now. Thursday afternoon, I arrived at the financial district address 15 minutes early, my equipment bags making my shoulders ache. The building was modern glass and steel, the kind of place where everyone looked important and purposeful. The lobby directory listed Pellegrini Imports on the 14th floor. The elevator ride up felt longer than it should have. I used the mirrored walls to check my appearance, making sure I looked professional. Black pants, gray blazer, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. I wanted to look competent, serious, not like someone who'd been dripping wet in the back of his SUV a week ago. The offices were sleek and modern, all glass walls and clean lines. A receptionist directed me to a conference room where I could set up. I was arranging my lights when Franco walked in. He wore a navy suit today, white shirt, no tie. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and he carried the scent of his cologne that I remembered from the car. That cedar, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Megan, thank you for coming. He closed the conference room door behind him, and suddenly the large space felt much smaller. Vincent briefed you on what we need? Yes. Headshots and some office shots. Pretty straightforward. I finished adjusting a light, then turned to face him. Should we start with you since you're here? Actually, I'm not one of the subjects. The headshots are for my team. I prefer to stay off the website. Of course he did. A man who introduced himself with just a first name wouldn't want his face plastered on a corporate website. But I'd like to stay and observe if that's acceptable. Make sure the images match what we need. What he meant was, he wanted to make sure I could actually do the job he'd hired me for. Fair enough. The next 2 hours passed in focused work. Vincent brought in employees one by one, and I photographed them against the simple backdrop I'd set up. Franco watched from a corner of the room, occasionally making quiet suggestions, but mostly just observing with that intensity that made me hyper-aware of every movement I made. When the last headshot was complete, Franco walked with me through the office, pointing out spaces he wanted photographed. The main floor with its glass walls and city views. The break room that looked more like an upscale cafe. A conference room with a table that could seat 20. I worked methodically, aware of Franco's presence behind me, following at a respectful distance. He didn't speak unless I asked questions, but I could feel his attention like a physical weight. "These are good," he said, when I showed him some of the shots on my camera's display screen. Better than I expected. "You didn't think I could do corporate work?" "I didn't know. You photograph events, weddings. This is different." "Not that different. It's still about capturing spaces and people in their best light." I moved to a window, framing a shot of the city skyline visible from the 14th floor. "Tell me about Pellegrini Imports. What do you import?" "Various goods. Textiles from Italy, wine, olive oil, some specialty furniture." He said it smoothly, the practiced answer of someone who'd explained his business many times. "My grandfather started the company 60 years ago. My father expanded it. Now it's my responsibility." There was something in his tone when he mentioned his father. Not grief exactly, but a weight, a burden. That's a lot of legacy to carry. "It is." He moved to stand beside me at the window, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "But it's also an honor. My family built something lasting. I intend to maintain it." We stood there for a moment, looking out at the city. Manhattan stretched before us, vast and indifferent. Millions of lives playing out in the buildings below. From this height, it all seemed manageable, contained. But I knew better. The city could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. "The photos should be ready by early next week," I said, stepping back from the window and from his proximity. "I'll send you a link to a private gallery where you can select which ones you want." "Excellent." He turned to face me fully. "Would you like to have dinner?" "To discuss the photos, and as thanks for accommodating my schedule on short notice." The invitation caught me off guard. "That's not necessary. You're paying me well for the work." "I'm aware. This isn't about payment. It's about conversation." His dark eyes held mine. "Unless you have other plans." I should have said yes, should have invented a prior commitment. Dinner with a client blurred professional lines. But the truth was, I wanted to have dinner with him. Wanted to continue the conversation we'd started at the wedding. To understand this man who carried grief like a familiar companion, and who'd somehow earned my dog's instant devotion. "I can't tonight. I have Sonny, and he's been alone most of the day." Franco nodded, accepting this. "What about Saturday? During the day? You could bring Sonny. I'd like to see him again if that's acceptable." "You want to see my dog?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "I enjoyed meeting him, and you mentioned he's been acting strange. Perhaps another visit would help settle whatever he's experiencing." He paused. "Unless you'd prefer not to." There was something vulnerable in the question, hidden beneath his confident exterior. This man who commanded offices and had security details wanted permission to spend time with my rescue dog. "Saturday works," I heard myself say. "There's a park in Brooklyn, Prospect Park. We go there most weekends. Text me the details. I'll meet you there." He pulled out his phone, and I gave him my number, watching as he saved it. 11 o'clock? 11 is perfect. We walked back to the conference room where I'd left my equipment. Vincent appeared as I was packing up, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp as they moved between Franco and me. "The photos are complete?" Vincent asked. "Yes. Megan will have them ready early next week." Franco's tone shifted, becoming more formal in front of his assistant. "Make sure she's compensated promptly." "Of course." Vincent turned to me. "Thank you for your work, Ms. Collins." I nodded, hoisting my equipment bag onto my shoulder. Franco walked me to the elevator, his hand hovering near the small of my back but not quite touching. The doors opened and I stepped inside, turning to face him. "Thank you for the work," I said, "and for the invitation. Saturday. I'm looking forward to it." The elevator doors began to close, but I heard him add, "Sonny made quite an impression. I'd like to see if his owner did the same." The doors closed before I could respond, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the realization that whatever was happening between Franco Pellegrini and me had moved beyond a chance encounter in the rain. Saturday arrived with November's particular brand of cold sunshine, the kind that looked deceptively warm through windows, but bit through jackets the moment you stepped outside. I bundled up in layers, grabbing Sonny's new leash, the one I'd splurged on after my corporate photography payment cleared, and headed to Prospect Park. Franco had texted the night before confirming our 11 o'clock meeting near the main entrance off Prospect Park West. I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time that morning deciding what to wear, finally settling on jeans, boots, and a forest green sweater under my leather jacket. Casual, but put together. Like I hadn't thought about it at all. Even though I absolutely had. The park was busy with weekend joggers and families taking advantage of the crisp weather. Autumn had painted the trees in shades of rust and gold, leaves crunching underfoot as Sonny and I made our way past the long meadow. He was pulling at his leash more than usual, his nose working overtime to process all the scents around us. I spotted Franco before Sonny did, which was unusual. He stood near a bench overlooking one of the park's trails, and seeing him in casual clothes was almost jarring. Dark jeans that actually fit like jeans instead of designer attempts at casual. A charcoal gray sweater that looked soft and expensive under a black jacket. His hair was less perfectly styled than I'd seen it before, like he'd just run his fingers through it. No security detail visible anywhere. Then Sonny caught sight of him, and all hell broke loose. My 75-pound golden retriever transformed into a guided missile, yanking the leash so hard I nearly dropped it. He let out a bark of pure joy and took off running, dragging me stumbling behind him. "Sonny, no, stop." My commands fell on completely deaf ears. Franco turned at the commotion, and his expression shifted from surprise to genuine amusement, as Sonny barreled toward him like they'd been separated for years instead of a week. At the last second, I managed to brace myself, but Sonny didn't slow down. He launched himself at Franco with such enthusiasm that Franco actually had to take a step back to absorb the impact. "I'm so sorry," I gasped, finally catching up and grabbing Sonny's collar. "He's never like this. I swear he has manners, just apparently not around you." Franco was laughing, actually laughing, as he knelt down to Sonny's level. My dog was practically vibrating with excitement, his tail a golden blur, his whole body wiggling as he tried to lick Franco's face. "It's fine. I'm glad to see you too, boy." Franco scratched behind Sonny's ears exactly the way he had in the car, and Sonny made a sound that was half whine, half groan of pure contentment. He remembers me. Clearly. I loosened my grip on the collar, since Sonny showed no signs of calming down anytime soon. I've never seen him react to anyone like this. Not even me when I come home from work. Dogs have long memories for people who are kind to them. Franco looked up at me, his dark eyes warm in the sunlight. "Shall we walk?" He seems to have energy to burn. We started down one of the trails that wound through the park, Sonny trotting between us but consistently veering closer to Franco's side. The awkwardness I'd expected never materialized. Instead, we fell into easy conversation about the park, the weather, the photographers I'd seen trying to capture the autumn colors. "How did the photos turn out, from the office?" Franco asked after we'd been walking for about 10 minutes. "Good. Vincent approved them all. The payment cleared yesterday, actually. Thank you for that. You earned it. The quality was excellent." He glanced at me. "Have you always wanted to be a photographer?" "Not always. I studied marketing in college, actually. Photography was just a hobby at first. Something I did to relax between classes. I watched Sonny investigate a particularly interesting tree. After my parents died, I needed something that felt meaningful. Capturing moments people want to remember. Preserving memories. It helped me process losing them. How long ago did they pass? 3 years. Car accident on their way back from visiting me in Boston. I'd just graduated and moved there for a job. The familiar weight settled in my chest. They were supposed to stay one more day, but my mom had a doctor's appointment she didn't want to miss. If I'd just insisted they stay, that's not your fault. Franco's voice was gentle but firm. You can't hold yourself responsible for timing and circumstances beyond your control. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't always override guilt. I used his own words from the wedding, and recognition flickered in his eyes. You understand that, don't you? With Apollo, he was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. Yes, I understand exactly. We'd reached a more secluded area of the park, trees forming a canopy overhead, filtering the sunlight into dappled patterns on the ground. Franco pulled a tennis ball from his jacket pocket, and Sonny's attention locked onto it immediately. You came prepared, I observed. I told you I had a golden retriever. I remember what they love. He threw the ball down the path, and Sonny took off like a shot. What happened next would have been comical if it wasn't so telling. Sonny retrieved the ball perfectly, but instead of bringing it back to me, He ran straight to Franco and dropped it at his feet, tail wagging expectantly. "Sonny, bring it here," I called. He looked at me, looked at Franco, and nudged the ball closer to Franco's shoe. "Traitor," I muttered. Franco picked up the ball and threw it again. Same result. 5 more throws. 5 more times Sonny returned to Franco exclusively, like I wasn't even there. "I'm sorry," Franco said, though he was clearly trying not to smile. "I'm not deliberately stealing your dog's affection. Aren't you, though? You brought a ball. You're doing that thing with his ears that he loves. You're basically the golden retriever whisperer." I tried to sound annoyed, but couldn't quite manage it. "Would you like to throw the next one? I throw the ball for him every single day. He never ignores me like this." But I took the ball from Franco and threw it. Sonny chased it enthusiastically, brought it back, and deposited it at Franco's feet again. "I don't understand it either," Franco admitted, crouching down to Sonny's level again. "But I'm not complaining." Watching them together, seeing the way Franco's normally guarded expression softened completely when he looked at Sonny, I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't about business transactions or convenient networking. This was a man confronting grief he'd carried for 20 years, finding something he'd denied himself through my stubborn, overly friendly dog. "Tell me more about Apollo," I said quietly. "You said he saved your life." Franco straightened slowly, the ball still in his hand. Sonny sat at his feet, looking up at him with adoration. "I was 14, almost 15. We had a summer house upstate. Nothing as grand as people probably imagine. Just a comfortable place on some land where my father could pretend he wasn't always working." He threw the ball absently, and we started walking again. "My mother had a heart condition. We knew, but she refused to let it stop her from living normally. That must have been scary." It was, especially for my father. He tried to protect her from stress, from anything that might trigger an episode. Franco's jaw tightened. The night of the fire, Apollo started barking. It was about 3 a.m. He wouldn't stop, just kept scratching at my door. I finally got up to see what was wrong, and the moment I opened my door, I smelled smoke. We'd stopped walking, without me realizing it. Sonny had returned, and was sitting pressed against Franco's legs, like he could sense the weight of the memory. The first floor was already engulfed. I tried to get to my parents' room, but Apollo grabbed my sleeve, literally pulled me toward the other staircase that led outside. He looked down at Sonny, his hand moving automatically to stroke the dog's head. I fought him. I was screaming for my parents, trying to get past him, but he wouldn't let me. He was stronger than I was, and he got me outside. "Franco," I breathed. Once I was out, he went back in. I was trying to follow when the firefighters arrived. They held me back, and I watched the house burn. His voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way people sound when they're holding themselves together by sheer will. They found my mother in her bed. The heart attack killed her before the fire reached her room. Apollo was near her door. He'd gone back to try to save her. Without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. He looked down at our joined hands, surprise flickering across his face, but he didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine carrying that." The worst part was my father. He blamed himself for not installing better smoke detectors, for not waking up in time. He carried that guilt until he died 4 years later. Franco's fingers tightened around mine. I was 19 when he passed. Heart attack. Like my mother. Suddenly, I was responsible for everything. The business, the family, decisions I wasn't remotely prepared to make. That's too young to lose both parents. Is there a right age? His eyes met mine, and I saw the vulnerability he usually kept hidden so carefully. "You were what, 23? 24? 24. And you're right, there's no good age. It changes you." We stood there in the middle of the path, holding hands, both of us carrying grief we rarely shared with anyone. Sonny leaned against Franco's legs, and for a moment, the 3 of us existed in a small bubble of shared understanding. "Photography became your way of holding on to moments," Franco said softly. "What became yours?" "Control. Structure. Making sure I was never unprepared again." A sad smile touched his lips. "Not exactly healthy, but effective. And now here you are, in a park with a stranger and her dog. Being spontaneous. You're not a stranger anymore, Megan. Not after this conversation." The intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. We were still holding hands, and I became acutely aware of his thumb brushing against my wrist. Probably unconscious on his part, but sending electricity through my nervous system. Sonny chose that moment to bark and drop the ball at Franco's feet again, breaking the moment. Franco laughed, releasing my hand to pick up the ball. Persistent, isn't he? It's one of his better qualities. We walked for another hour, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. I told him about disastrous photo shoots and difficult clients. He shared carefully edited stories about the import business, always keeping things vague but engaging. By the time we ended up at a small cafe near the park's edge, my cheeks hurt from smiling, and Sonny was finally starting to show signs of tiring out. The cafe had outdoor seating, and we claimed a table with a heat lamp. Franco ordered an espresso. I got a cappuccino, and Sonny collapsed at Franco's feet like he'd been there all his life. I have a question, Franco said after our drinks arrived. Would you be interested in photographing an event next week? It's a fundraiser for a children's hospital. Nothing as elaborate as the wedding you shot in the Hamptons. But it's for a cause I support. You're becoming my most frequent client. Is that a problem? No, just unexpected. I warmed my hands on my cup. What day? Saturday evening. I can send you the details. The pay will be competitive. You know you don't have to keep hiring me. I'm perfectly capable of finding work on my own. I'm aware. But I trust your eye, and I'd rather work with someone I know will deliver quality results. He paused. Unless you'd prefer I didn't hire you. If it makes you uncomfortable. It doesn't. I was just making sure you weren't offering out of, pity or obligation. I don't do pity. His tone made it clear that was true. And my only obligation is to the hospital that will receive the fundraiser proceeds. We finished our coffee as the afternoon light started to change, turning everything golden. When it was time to leave, Sonny threw an absolute fit. He planted himself between Franco and me, whining pitifully when I tried to get him to move. Come on, Sonny. We need to go home. Franco knelt down one more time, holding Sonny's face gently between his hands. I'll see you again, boy. I promise. Like he understood, Sonny licked Franco's face once, then allowed me to lead him away. But he looked back every few steps, making sure Franco was still there. He really does like you, I said when we were finally walking toward the subway. Franco had walked us to the park entrance, his hands in his pockets, that almost smile back in place. The feeling is mutual. Thank you for today, Megan. I needed this more than you probably realize. Thank you for being honest. About Apollo. About everything. I'll send you the details about next week. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, but decided against it. Get home safely. As Sonny and I descended into the subway station, I looked back once. Franco was still standing there watching us leave, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely at peace. The fundraiser was being held at a gallery in Chelsea, a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting that gave everything an artistic edge. I arrived early to scout angles, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder as I moved through the space. The cause was children's health research, and the guest list, according to the invitation Franco had forwarded, was exclusive in that particular New York way that meant old money and older connections. By 7, the gallery was packed with people dressed in evening wear that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I worked the edges of the crowd, capturing candid moments, the way I always did. Through my viewfinder, the world became manageable, reduced to composition and light. That's when I started noticing the pattern. Franco stood near the bar, deep in conversation with a man in his 60s wearing a navy suit. As I watched, 3 separate people approached him, each one demonstrating a particular kind of deference. Not the polite respect you'd show any wealthy donor, but something deeper. Something that looked like fear wrapped in courtesy. A woman in diamonds touched his arm briefly, spoke into his ear, and moved away quickly when he shook his head. 2 men in dark suits flanked the entrance, their eyes constantly scanning the room, and every time their gaze landed on Franco, they relaxed fractionally. Security, I realized, but not the gallery's security. His. I lowered my camera, watching him directly for the first time that evening. He looked the same as always, perfectly tailored suit in charcoal gray, hair styled with casual precision. But seeing him here, surrounded by this particular crowd, context shifted everything. The way people moved around him, creating space without being obvious about it. The careful attention others paid to his conversations, like they were trying to hear without appearing to listen. I drifted closer to where he stood, not approaching directly, but positioning myself to photograph a sculpture nearby. Close enough to hear fragments of conversation. The shipment arrives Tuesday. The man in the navy suit was saying, his voice low. Same arrangement as last time? Vincent will handle the details. Family business stays with family. Franco's tone was measured, controlled. Nothing like the warmth he'd shown me at the park. Family business. The word hit differently in this context. I moved away before they noticed me, but my hands trembled slightly as I adjusted my camera settings. Other conversations drifted past me as I worked. 2 women near the catering table speaking in rapid Italian. Something about territories and agreements. A man on his phone in the corner, saying something about Pellegrini's people, with unmistakable respect in his voice. Pellegrini. Franco's last name, I realized. The name on his business card, on the office building. A name that clearly carried weight in circles I was only beginning to understand. I needed air. The gallery had a small outdoor courtyard, accessible through glass doors at the back of the space. I slipped outside, the November cold shocking after the warmth inside. Setting my camera on a nearby bench, I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages while trying to process what I was seeing. The door opened behind me, and voices carried into the courtyard. 2 men, speaking Italian. I'd taken 2 years of Italian in college, enough to understand basic conversation, and these 2 weren't being particularly quiet. Rispetto, that's what this is about. Respect for boundaries that have been established for decades. I recognized Franco's voice immediately. Times change, Pellegrini. Your father understood adaptation. Perhaps you're too rigid. The second voice was older, rougher, carrying an authority that matched Franco's. I turned slightly, pretending to frame a photo of the courtyard's architecture while watching them from the corner of my eye. The older man wore a light gray suit, his silver hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome 40 years ago. Now it just looked hard, carved from experience and decisions I probably didn't want to know about. He stood close to Franco. Too close. Invading space in a way that felt deliberately provocative. My father also understood the consequences of overreach. Franco's voice was ice. As do I. Consequences. The older man smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. Like the warehouse incident last month. That sent a message, one that apparently needs repeating. I should have gone back inside. Should have given them privacy for whatever this conversation was. But I was frozen, camera raised like a shield, capturing the architecture while trying to make myself invisible. The older man's gaze swept the courtyard and landed directly on me. Who's that? His voice sharpened. Photographer? Franco turned, and for just a second something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe, or calculation. Then his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. Gallery photographer, documenting the event. Documenting. The man moved away from Franco, walking toward me with deliberate steps. Photographers see things, hear things, sometimes remember things they shouldn't. My mouth went dry. I lowered my camera, trying to project casual professionalism despite my racing heart. Just here to photograph the fundraiser. I don't speak Italian, if that's what you're worried about. The lie came out smooth, and I saw Franco's eyes narrow fractionally. He'd heard me speak some Italian at the park. The scattered words I'd taught Sonny. He knew I was lying, but he didn't contradict me. Vittorio. Franco moved between us. Not obviously protective, but definitely creating a barrier. The photographer is contracted for the evening. Nothing more. Vittorio studied me for another long moment, his gaze calculating in a way that made my skin crawl. Then he smiled, showing too many teeth. Of course. Just an evening's work. Though I hope you're well compensated, young lady. In my experience, people who see too much without proper compensation tend to have accidents. The threat was barely veiled. I forced myself to hold his gaze, to not show how terrified I suddenly was. I'm just doing my job. We all are. He turned back to Franco. Think about what I said, Pellegrini. Adaptation or stagnation? Your choice. He walked back inside, leaving Franco and me alone in the cold courtyard. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in my ears, mixing with the distant sound of music and conversation from the gallery. You understood what we were saying. Franco's voice was quiet, certain. No point denying it now. Some of it. Enough. Then you understand why I need to speak with you. Privately. He gestured toward a door at the far end of the courtyard. "There's a private office. Now, please." It wasn't really a request. I grabbed my camera and followed him through the door, down a short hallway, into a small office with modern furniture and art that probably cost more than my car. Franco closed the door behind us, and suddenly the space felt very small. That man was Vittorio Grimaldiro. Franco's tone had shifted, becoming almost clinical. He controls territory in the Bronx and parts of northern Manhattan. We've had disagreements about boundaries recently. Disagreements. I echoed the word, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Like the warehouse he mentioned? Franco moved to lean against the desk, arms crossed. "You need to understand something, Megan. What I told you before about import business and real estate, that's all true, but it's not complete. Because you're in the Mafia." Saying it out loud felt surreal, like dialogue from a movie I'd accidentally walked into. That's not a word we use, but essentially, yes. My family. The Pellegrini family. We've controlled certain operations in this city for 3 generations. Import, export, construction, private security. Some of it's completely legitimate. Some of it exists in gray areas, and some of it is outright illegal. The confirmation should have sent me running. Instead, I found myself setting my camera down carefully, buying time to think. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Vittorio saw you. He knows you were at an event with me, possibly heard our conversation. That makes you a variable he'll want to assess." Franco's jaw tightened. "In my world, unknown variables are dangerous. To him and to you. Are you threatening me? I'm protecting you." The vehemence in his voice surprised me. Vittorio has a reputation for eliminating problems. If he thinks you know something that could be useful to his rivals, or dangerous to his operations, he'll either try to buy your cooperation or ensure your silence permanently. The room tilted slightly. I reached out to steady myself against a chair. "This is insane. I was just taking pictures." "I know. And I'm sorry you've been pulled into this. But you need to decide right now what you want to do." "Decide what?" Franco straightened, moving closer but stopping before he entered my personal space. "Option 1. You leave. Cut all contact with me, with this world. I'll provide security to make sure Vittorio knows you're not a threat, that you were just a photographer who happened to be in the wrong place. After a few weeks, he'll lose interest, and you'll be safe. And option 2, you acknowledge what I am, what this world is, and you let me protect you properly. Because whether you want it or not, you're now associated with me in Vittorio's mind. That won't disappear just because you stop taking my calls." I sank into the chair, my legs suddenly unreliable. Through the door, muffled by walls and distance, I could hear the fundraiser continuing. Normal people doing normal things while I sat in an office with a man who just confirmed he was exactly what I'd started to suspect. "Tell me honestly," I said, looking up at him. "Do you hurt innocent people?" Franco met my gaze directly. "I protect my family and my territory. Sometimes that requires violence. I don't apologize for that. But I don't traffic drugs. I don't exploit children. I don't harm people who aren't part of this world unless they threaten what's mine first." He paused. "I'm not a good man, Megan. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I have a code. And I don't cross certain lines. That's not exactly reassuring. It's honest, which is more than most people in my position would give you." I thought about Sonny's instant devotion, about the grief Franco carried for Apollo, about how gentle he'd been in the park. Those things were real too, not just facades hiding a monster. People were complicated, capable of both protection and violence, both tenderness and ruthlessness. "I need time to think," I finally said. "Take tonight. But Megan, understand that Vittorio knowing about you changes things. Whether you choose to walk away or not, I'm assigning someone to watch your apartment. Make sure you're safe. Just for a few weeks, until he loses interest. You're going to have me followed?" The violation of privacy should have angered me more than it did. "I'm going to keep you alive." His voice softened. "You can refuse the association with me. Refuse anything more between us. But I won't apologize for making sure Vittorio doesn't see you as a useful target." We stood there in that small office, the reality of his world settling around us like winter fog. I'd known, somewhere in the back of my mind, that Franco was dangerous, but knowing intellectually, and having it confirmed, standing in a room with him after watching him face down another dangerous man, that was different. That was choosing with open eyes. I should get back to work, I said, standing on shaky legs. People will notice I'm gone. Franco nodded, stepping aside to let me pass. But at the door, his hand caught mine briefly. Whatever you decide, thank you for today. For the park? For Sunny. For reminding me what it feels like to be just Franco, not Pellegrini. I squeezed his hand once, then slipped back into the gallery, back into the role of invisible photographer. But everything looked different now, cast in the knowledge of what I'd just learned. The fundraiser continued around me, elegant and civilized on the surface, while underneath ran currents of power and danger I was only beginning to understand. By the time the event ended, I'd made my decision. Not about Franco, not yet, but about whether I was brave or foolish. Maybe both. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo where my life continued almost normally, except for the black SUV that followed me to every job. It stayed back, never intrusive, but always there. A constant reminder that I'd stepped into a world that didn't let you leave just because you wanted to. I kept working. Photographed a corporate holiday party in Midtown, a small wedding in Brooklyn, headshots for an actress who couldn't afford the high-end photographers. My career didn't stop just because Franco Pellegrini had assigned someone to shadow my movements. If anything, knowing Vincent or one of his people was watching made me more determined to prove I could handle my own life. Then the flowers arrived. I came home on a Tuesday evening, arms full of equipment from a day shoot, and found them sitting outside my apartment door. An elaborate arrangement, the kind you see at funerals. All white lilies and roses, probably $200 worth of flowers with a small card tucked into the center. My hands shook as I pulled out the card. The message was written in Italian, but I understood every word. Photographers with curious eyes sometimes lose their vision permanently. Consider this friendly advice. No signature. None needed. I stood in my hallway, staring at those beautiful, threatening flowers, feeling my carefully maintained composure crack. This was real. Vittorio Grimaldiro wasn't going to forget I'd been in that courtyard, wasn't going to let me fade quietly into irrelevance. I left the arrangement in the hall and went inside, locking my door with trembling fingers. Sonny met me at the entrance, but instead of his usual enthusiastic greeting, he pressed against my legs, whining softly. His ears were flat against his head, his tail tucked. He kept looking at the door like something dangerous lurked just beyond it. "It's okay, boy. We're safe inside." But my voice sounded unconvincing even to my own ears. I tried to settle into my normal evening routine. Fed Sonny, though he barely touched his food. Uploaded photos from today's shoot, though my hands kept shaking on the keyboard. Made tea I didn't drink. Every sound from the hallway made both of us jump. At 8:30, someone knocked. Sonny's response was immediate and terrifying. He lunged at the door, barking with a ferocity I'd never heard from him before. His hackles raised, teeth bared. This wasn't my gentle golden retriever. This was a dog sensing genuine danger. "Megan, it's Franco. Open the door." I grabbed Sonny's collar, pulling him back while I checked the peephole. Franco stood there with Vincent flanking him, and 2 other large men I didn't recognize positioned behind them. All of them looked grim. I opened the door, and Franco's eyes immediately went to the flowers still sitting in the hallway. Something dangerous flashed across his face. Inside. Now. He moved past me, his security following. And suddenly my small apartment felt impossibly crowded. Vincent closed the door while Franco crouched down to Sonny's level. My dog stopped barking immediately, pressing against Franco instead, still trembling but finding comfort in his presence. The flowers arrived when? Franco's voice was controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. Maybe an hour ago. "I found them when I got home." "Did you touch them besides removing the card?" "No." "Why?" "Vincent." Franco held out his hand, and Vincent passed him a pair of latex gloves. Franco pulled them on and carefully lifted the arrangement, examining the base, the stems, even the water in the vase. After a thorough inspection, he set it down. Clean. No tracking device, no poison. Just a message. "A very clear message," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Franco straightened, removing the gloves. "Pack a bag. You're coming with me tonight." "Excuse me? This isn't a request, Megan." Vittorio just escalated from watching to active intimidation. The next step is action, and I'm not giving him the opportunity. Every independent instinct I possessed rebelled. I'm not abandoning my home because of some flowers and a threatening note. I've dealt with worse. Have you? Franco moved closer, his intensity focused entirely on me. Have you dealt with someone who has the resources and willingness to make threats like this a reality? Because I've seen what Vittorio does to people he considers problems. It doesn't end with flowers. I can't just leave. I have work, clients, a life here, which you can continue from a secure location. I have a townhouse in the Upper West Side. You'll have your own room, your own space. You can keep working, keep your clients, keep your independence. The only difference is you'll be somewhere Vittorio can't reach you easily. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to prove I didn't need protection. Didn't need Franco swooping in to save me. But Sonny whined again, pressing harder against Franco's legs. And I realized my dog had been acting strange all evening. Nervous, unable to settle, refusing food. Animals sensed things humans rationalized away. Just for a few days, I heard myself say. Until he loses interest. Until the situation is resolved. Franco corrected. That might take longer than a few days. How much longer? He exchanged a look with Vincent. Depends on how reasonable Vittorio decides to be. Could be weeks. I can't impose on you for weeks. You're not imposing. You're accepting protection I'm offering because I refuse to have your safety on my conscience. His jaw tightened. Please, Megan. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The please did it. Franco Pellegrini didn't strike me as a man who said please often. I packed quickly, grabbing clothes, toiletries, my laptop and backup drives. Everything I needed to keep working. Sonny stayed glued to Franco's side the entire time, calmer than he'd been since I got home. The townhouse was beautiful in an understated way. No ostentatious displays of wealth, just quality everywhere you looked. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, art that looked original but not showy. Franco gave me the full tour, showing me a bedroom easily twice the size of my entire studio apartment, with an attached bathroom that had a soaking tub and separate shower. There's an office across the hall, he said, opening another door to reveal a desk, multiple monitors, high-speed internet setup, everything a photographer could need for editing. I had Vincent set it up this afternoon. You can work here without interruption. You planned this before the flowers even arrived. I planned for multiple scenarios. This was always the most likely. He gestured down the hallway. My bedroom and office are on the first floor. You won't be disturbed unless you want company. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself to anything. My housekeeper, Teresa, comes daily. She knows you're a guest and to respect your privacy. It was all so carefully thought out, giving me space while keeping me protected. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt trapped by good intentions and circumstances beyond my control. The first few days were awkward. Franco left early for work, returned late. We'd pass in the hallway, exchange polite greetings, nothing more. He was giving me the space he'd promised, respecting boundaries I'd barely articulated. But Sonny had no such reservations. The moment Franco came home, my dog abandoned me completely, following Franco around like he'd found his true owner. I kept working, edited photos from recent jobs, took video calls with clients, even did a small shoot in the neighborhood with Vincent trailing discreetly behind. My career continued uninterrupted, which helped maintain some sense of normalcy in this bizarre situation. It was the third night when things shifted. I'd been editing wedding photos until almost 2 a.m, perfecting the color balance on a particularly tricky indoor shot. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, and I needed water. The townhouse was silent as I made my way downstairs to the kitchen, my bare feet quiet on the hardwood. The living room was dark except for the city lights filtering through the windows. I almost didn't see Franco sitting there on the sofa, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, still dressed in his work clothes minus the jacket and tie. Sonny was sprawled at his feet, asleep. Sorry, I said quietly. Didn't mean to disturb you. You're not. He gestured to the seat across from him. Can't sleep? Working late. You? Same. He took a sip of what I assumed was whiskey. How are you managing? Being here, I mean. I sat down, curling my legs under me. It's strange. Nice, but strange. Your home is beautiful. It's a house, not quite a home. He said it matter-of-factly, like stating the weather. Homes require more than just occupancy. You live here alone? Most of the time. Vincent stays sometimes when we're working late. But yes, generally alone. The admission hung between us. Here was Franco Pellegrini, powerful enough to have security details and multiple properties, admitting to loneliness in a way that felt almost vulnerable. That must be hard, I said softly. Being surrounded by people all day but still alone. It's the cost of this life. Trust is expensive in my world, and genuine connection is nearly impossible. People either fear you or want something from you. Sometimes both. He looked at me directly. You're the first person in years who sees me as just Franco. Not Pellegrini, not the head of a family, just a man who happened to give you a ride in the rain, and who my dog decided to adopt as his new favorite person. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Sonny has good instincts. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the darkness making it easier to be honest. I understand loneliness, I finally said. After my parents died, I had people around me all the time. Friends offering support, distant relatives suddenly interested in my life, but none of them understood what it felt like to have your entire foundation ripped away. To realize that control was an illusion, and everything could change in an instant. So you became a photographer. So I became someone who captures moments before they disappear. Someone who controls the frame, the composition, the story being told. I pulled a throw pillow onto my lap, needing something to hold. It's probably not healthy, but it's how I cope. We all have our ways. Franco set his glass down on the table between us. I built structures, systems, rules. If I could control my environment perfectly, if I could anticipate every threat and eliminate every variable, then maybe I could prevent the kind of loss I experienced. But you can't eliminate every variable. No, you can't. His gaze held mine in the dim light. Sometimes the most important variables are the ones you never planned for. The weight of what he wasn't saying pressed against my chest. I was a variable he hadn't planned for. Sonny was a variable. This entire situation had spiraled from a chance encounter into something neither of us could have predicted. Thank you, I said, breaking the moment before it became too intense. For the office, for letting me keep working. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You've spent 3 years rebuilding your life after loss. I won't be responsible for taking that away from you, even temporarily. He stood, offering me his hand to help me up. Get some sleep, Megan. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps with Vittorio. I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine. He pulled me to my feet, but instead of immediately releasing me, his thumb brushed across my wrist once, a gesture so brief I might have imagined it. Good night, Franco. Good night. I went back upstairs, but the warmth of his touch lingered long after I'd crawled into bed. Somewhere below, I could hear Franco moving around, eventually climbing the stairs to his own room, and for the first time since the flowers arrived, I felt something other than fear about the situation I'd found myself in. A week into living at the townhouse, I got a call from a client about a commercial shoot that required specific equipment I'd left at my apartment. High-end lenses I couldn't afford to replace, specialized lighting that was stored in my closet. The job paid well, and I needed to maintain my reputation for reliability. I'll send Vincent with you, Franco said when I mentioned needing to make the trip. We were having breakfast in his kitchen, a routine we'd fallen into. Coffee and quiet conversation before he left for whatever business he conducted during daylight hours. I can go alone. It's just picking up equipment. No. The word was final, non-negotiable. If you need something from Queens, Vincent goes with you, and 2 others. I wanted to argue, but the set of his jaw told me it would be pointless. An hour later, Vincent arrived with 2 men whose names I didn't catch, both carrying themselves with the alert tension of people trained for violence. Sonny whined as I prepared to leave, pressing against Franco's legs in the way that had become habitual. Stay here, boy, I told him, scratching behind his ears. I'll be back soon. The drive to Queens took 40 minutes in midday traffic. Vincent sat in the front passenger seat, constantly scanning our surroundings. I tried to relax in the back, reviewing my shot list for tomorrow's commercial shoot, but the tension from the 2 guards flanking me was contagious. If anything, this was the opposite of reckless. 3 armed men and a carefully scouted street just to grab some lenses I couldn't afford to replace. My building looked exactly as I'd left it. Slightly run down, functional, home. Vincent got out first, his eyes sweeping the street with professional thoroughness. Then he froze, his hand moving inside his jacket. Back in the vehicle. Now. What's wrong? Gray sedan, 2 o'clock, occupied, engine running, No reason to be parked there. His voice was sharp with command. Get back in the car, Miss Collins. I turned to look, curiosity overriding caution. That's when I saw the van, unmarked and white, its side door already sliding open. Everything happened impossibly fast. Men emerged from the van, 4 of them, moving with coordinated precision. Vincent shoved me hard toward the SUV, his body positioning itself between me and the threat. One of Franco's guards yanked open the rear door, shouting something I couldn't process over the sudden roar of gunfire. The sound was nothing like movies. Louder, sharper, each shot cracking through the air like the world breaking apart. I hit the ground beside the SUV, Vincent covering me completely, his weight pressing me into the cold pavement. Something warm and wet splashed onto my shoulder. Stay down! Vincent's voice was strained, different. Don't move! More gunshots, these from Franco's other guards returning fire. Screaming from somewhere, maybe from me. The acrid smell of gunpowder. Vincent's breathing harsh and labored against my ear. Then engines roaring, tires squealing, the attackers retreating as suddenly as they'd appeared. Silence crashed down like a physical thing. Vincent? I tried to turn under his weight. Vincent, are you okay? Been better. He pushed himself up with visible effort, his left arm hanging useless at his side. Blood soaked through his jacket, spreading dark across the expensive fabric. You hit? No. No, I'm fine. My voice sounded strange, too high, shaking. You're bleeding. Oh God, you're bleeding so much. Flesh wound. He swayed slightly, caught himself against the SUV. Get her inside, he told the other guards. Lock the doors. Franco's already been notified. One of the guards, the one with the scar above his eyebrow, was on his phone speaking rapid Italian. The other helped me into the vehicle, his hands surprisingly gentle despite their size. Through the window, I watched Vincent lean against the car, his face pale but composed. Like taking a bullet was just another day at the office. Franco arrived in under 10 minutes, 3 more vehicles with him. I watched through the tinted window as he took in the scene, his expression transforming into something terrible and cold. He spoke to Vincent briefly, then came to the SUV, yanking the door open. Are you hurt? His hands were on my face, my shoulders, checking for injuries with clinical efficiency. I'm fine. Vincent, he took the bullet. Franco, he saved my life. I know. His jaw was so tight I could see the muscle jumping. We're going to a doctor, not a hospital, a private facility. Don't speak to anyone about what happened. The doctor operated out of a brownstone in Brooklyn, asking no questions as he laid Vincent on an examination table and cut away his bloody shirt. The bullet had gone through clean, missing bone and major arteries, but the damage was still significant. I stood against the wall, unable to look away as the doctor worked, stitching muscle and skin with practiced efficiency. He'll need weeks to recover properly, the doctor said to Franco. No physical activity, physical therapy starting in a week. He was lucky. Lucky. Vincent had thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for me, and he was lucky. After the doctor finished, Franco drove us back to the townhouse himself. Vincent dozed in the passenger seat, drugged with pain medication. I sat in the back, my hands still shaking, blood dried on my jacket sleeve. At the townhouse, Franco settled Vincent in a guest room, arranging for around-the-clock care despite Vincent's protests that he was fine. When Vincent finally fell into medicated sleep, Franco took my hand and led me to his study, closing the door behind us. This ends now. His voice was controlled fury, barely contained. I'm getting you out of New York. New identity, new city, enough money to start over anywhere in the world. I have contacts in 3 continents who can make you disappear so thoroughly not even Vittorio's resources could find you. What? No. This isn't negotiable, Megan. Vincent took a bullet today. Next time it could be you. I won't risk that. I'm not running away. I pulled my hand free, anger finally cutting through the shock and fear. And you don't get to make that decision for me. Someone has to keep you alive since you clearly won't prioritize your own safety. My safety? I was getting equipment for work. I was trying to maintain the life I built. I'm not letting Vittorio Grimaldiro take that from me, and I'm sure as hell not letting you send me away like I'm some problem to be solved. We stood facing each other, both of us breathing hard, the day's violence still crackling between us like electricity. I can't lose you. The words came out raw, stripped of the control he usually maintained so carefully. Do you understand that? The thought of Vincent's bullet being yours? The thought of identifying your body because I couldn't protect you? I can't live with that. Then don't send me away. I moved closer, my hands finding his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath my palms. Protect me by letting me stay. By trusting that I'm strong enough to handle this. His hands came up to frame my face, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones. You shouldn't have to handle this. You should be photographing weddings and living your quiet life and never knowing people like Vittorio exist. Too late. I know now. And I'm still here. Still choosing this. Choosing you. Something broke in his careful control. He kissed me like he'd been holding back for weeks, which he probably had. His mouth was demanding, desperate, tasting like fear and relief and something deeper I didn't have words for yet. I kissed him back with equal desperation, channeling the terror of the day, the adrenaline still flooding my system, into the slide of lips and the tangle of breath. We broke apart, breathing hard, his forehead pressed against mine. Not like this, he said, his voice rough. Not when you're running on adrenaline and trauma. You deserve better than post-crisis chemistry. Franco, tomorrow. Ask me again tomorrow when your hands stop shaking and you've had time to process what happened today. If you still want this, want me, then we'll talk. He stepped back, putting space between us despite the visible effort it cost him. I promise I'll resolve this with Vittorio. Soon. But tonight, you need rest and time to think clearly. He left me standing in his study, my lips still burning from his kiss, my heart racing for entirely different reasons than fear. Through the walls, I could hear Vincent's occasional groan of pain, a constant reminder of the violence that had erupted into my previously safe existence. I should have been terrified. Should have taken Franco's offer to disappear. Instead, I went upstairs, climbed into the guest bed, and fell asleep, thinking about the way he'd said, "I can't lose you," like it was the most important truth he'd ever spoken. 2 days after the shooting, Franco called a meeting that Vincent, despite his injury, insisted on attending. I found them in Franco's study, Vincent's arm still in a sling, both men bent over documents spread across the desk. "This is everything we have on Vittorio's operations for the past 6 months," Vincent was saying, his voice strained but determined. 3 violations of established territory agreements, 2 instances of trafficking that breached the Commission's rules, and now an attack on a civilian with no connection to our business. Franco looked up when I entered, his expression shifting from intense focus to something softer. "You should be resting. I've been resting for 2 days. I'm going stir-crazy." I moved closer to the desk, curiosity overriding caution. "What's the Commission?" Vincent and Franco exchanged a look. Then Franco gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. If you're going to be part of this world, you should understand how it works." For the next hour, he explained the structure that had governed organized crime in New York for nearly a century. 5 families, each with their territory and operations, all answering to a governing body called the Commission. Rules established to prevent the kind of open warfare that would draw federal attention and destroy everyone's business. These men weren't cartoon villains. They were businessmen who understood risk, leverage, and fallout better than most politicians. "Vittorio broke those rules when he ordered the attack on you," Franco said, his jaw tight. "He targeted a civilian who has no involvement in family business. That violates one of our oldest and most sacred codes. So what happens now? I'm calling an emergency meeting of the 5 family heads. Neutral territory. Witnesses from each family. I'll present the evidence of Vittorio's violations and demand consequences. Let me come with you." The words were out before I'd fully thought them through. Absolutely not. As a photographer. To document the meeting. I leaned forward, warming to the idea. Think about it. If I'm there as a neutral witness, as the civilian Vittorio attacked, it reinforces your point. It shows everyone exactly what he's willing to do. Plus, having documentation makes it official. Harder for anyone to dispute what was agreed upon. Vincent nodded slowly. She has a point. The visual record could be useful. And her presence demonstrates confidence. Shows we're not hiding her. Franco's expression was thunderous. "You were nearly killed 3 days ago, and hiding me away doesn't change that. But showing the other families that I exist, that I'm real, that I'm under your protection, that sends a message." I held his gaze. "Let me help end this, Franco. Please, The meeting took another week to arrange, giving Vincent time to heal enough to insist on attending despite the doctor's protests. It was held at an Italian restaurant in Little Italy, closed for the evening, neutral ground that belonged to none of the families. I dressed carefully in black pants and a blazer, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, trying to project professional competence despite my racing heart. Vincent met us in the foyer, his suit jacket carefully tailored to accommodate the sling he still wore. "You sure about this?" he asked me quietly, while Franco spoke with his security. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him since the shooting. "You're good for him, you know. He hasn't cared about anything this much in years." Inside, the restaurant had been transformed. A large round table dominated the center of the room, 6 chairs arranged with mathematical precision. Men in expensive suits lined the walls, at least 3 security guards per family, all watching each other with barely concealed tension. The 5 family heads arrived within minutes of each other. I recognized Vittorio immediately, his silver hair and hard face impossible to forget. The others were strangers, older men who carried themselves with the particular confidence that came from decades of unchallenged power. Franco introduced me simply as Miss Collins, photographer documenting this meeting for the record. I set up my camera on a tripod in the corner, trying to be unobtrusive while capturing everything. The meeting began with formal pleasantries that felt absurd given the circumstances. Then Franco laid out his case with methodical precision. He presented financial records showing Vittorio's encroachment on established territories, testimony from witnesses about trafficking violations, and finally, Vincent's medical records from the shooting. "The woman he targeted," Franco said, his voice carrying across the room, "has no involvement in our business. She's a photographer who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The attack on her violated our most fundamental rule, the one that separates us from common criminals. We don't involve civilians." An older man with white hair spoke up, his accent thick with Brooklyn. "This is true? The woman was uninvolved?" "Completely. Her only connection to me was through work I hired her for. Legitimate photography work." Vittorio leaned back in his chair, his expression contemptuous. "The girl saw things at the hospital fundraiser, heard things. That makes her a security risk. She heard you threaten her," Franco countered. "She heard you demonstrate exactly the kind of reckless behavior that brings federal attention down on all of us. You created the security risk, Vittorio, not her." The debate continued for over an hour, each family head weighing in. I kept photographing, capturing the tension, the arguments, the moment when one of the older bosses slammed his hand on the table demanding order. Through my viewfinder, I watched Franco command the room with careful restraint, never raising his voice but making his points with devastating clarity. Finally, the man with white hair, who seemed to hold some kind of senior position, spoke. "Vittorio, you crossed a line. We all agree. The question is what happens now." "A formal ceasefire," Franco said immediately. "Documented and witnessed. Vittorio returns to his established territory and stays there. Any retaliation against Miss Collins or anyone associated with her will be considered a declaration of war against the Pellegrini family, which this commission will treat as a violation of our agreements. And if I refuse," Vittorio's voice was cold, "then we have a war. One that will draw federal attention none of us can afford. One that will cost all of us money, resources, and lives. Over what? Your pride?" The silence stretched. Finally, another family head spoke, a younger man with calculating eyes. "Accept the terms, Vittorio. This has gone far enough." One by one, the other bosses agreed. Vittorio sat rigid, fury radiating from him, but he was outnumbered and he knew it. "Fine. Ceasefire. But understand this, Pellegrini. You've made an enemy today. I've had you as an enemy for months. At least now it's official." Franco's voice was ice. The agreement was written out by hand, old school, and signed by all 5 family heads. I photographed each signature, the formal record Franco had wanted. As the meeting broke up, Vittorio passed close to where I stood by my camera. He didn't say anything, didn't even look directly at me, but the hatred coming off him was palpable. Franco materialized at my side immediately. "Don't engage, just pack up your equipment." The drive back to the townhouse was silent. Only when we were inside, the door locked and security positioned outside, did I finally let myself shake. "You were right," Franco said quietly. Your presence made a difference. They saw you as real, not just an abstract problem. It made my argument stronger. I was terrified the entire time. I know, you hid it well. He moved closer, his hands framing my face gently. It's over now. The ceasefire holds because breaking it would cost Vittorio more than his pride can afford. The next few days were tense, waiting for confirmation that Vittorio's people had stood down. But gradually, life began normalizing. Vincent recovered enough to return to light duty. The security around the townhouse remained, but felt less urgent. And then Franco took me back to my apartment in Queens. The building looked exactly as I'd left it, but now I saw it through different eyes. My previous life, the one where I worried about rent and difficult clients and whether I'd booked enough work for the month. It felt both familiar and impossibly distant. I had the locks changed, Franco said as we stood outside my door. Security system installed. And there will always be someone watching, at least for the foreseeable future. But this is your home. If you want to come back, I understand. I looked at him. At this man who had turned my world inside out in the span of 6 weeks, who had protected me, who had kissed me, and then stepped back because he wanted me to choose with clear eyes. I don't want to come back. Not permanently. I took his hand. I want to stay at the townhouse. With you. If that's still something you want. It's all I want. His voice was rough with emotion. But you need to understand what that means, Megan. The danger doesn't disappear completely. There will always be risks, always be limitations. I can't take you to public places without security. Can't promise you a normal life. I stopped wanting normal the night Sonny jumped into your car. I smiled despite the seriousness of the conversation. I want this. Want you. Want whatever complicated, dangerous, beautiful thing we're building together. He kissed me then, thorough and claiming. And this time he didn't pull away. This time, when we finally broke apart, he kept his arms around me, holding me close. Come home, he said against my hair. Let's go home. We went back to the townhouse together. I kept my apartment as a backup, as storage, but my life had shifted to that beautiful house on the Upper West Side. I continued my photography work, booking weddings and corporate events and everything in between. Vincent, recovered now except for occasional stiffness in his shoulder, often accompanied me to shoots, claiming it was security protocol. But I suspected he just enjoyed getting out of the office. And Franco, who had spent years keeping people at a distance, slowly let me in. Not all at once, but in careful increments. Late-night conversations in his study. Quiet dinners where he talked about his father and the weight of legacy. Mornings where Sonny would wake us both by jumping on the bed, demanding attention from the man he'd chosen before either of us understood why. The danger never completely disappeared. It couldn't. Not in Franco's world, but we'd found a way to exist within it. To build something real in the spaces between the threats and the careful negotiations of power. It wasn't the life I'd imagined 6 weeks ago when I'd been chasing my dog through a rainstorm. It was better. 3 months after the commission meeting, December arrived with the kind of cold that made even native New Yorkers huddle deeper into their coats. I stood in Franco's kitchen, watching Teresa arrange platters of food with the precision of someone who'd been doing this for decades. You're nervous, she observed, not looking up from the antipasto she was assembling. That obvious? You've rearranged those wine glasses 4 times. She smiled warmly. Don't worry. They'll love you. Franco's family gathering was an annual tradition, Teresa had explained. Cousins, aunts, uncles, business associates who'd become family over decades of shared history. All gathering to celebrate the holidays in a house that would soon be filled with the kind of controlled chaos only Italian families could create. Franco appeared in the doorway, looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a navy sweater. Sonny immediately abandoned the rawhide bone he'd been working on to press against Franco's legs, tail wagging. Still betraying me for him, I see, I said to my dog. He has excellent taste. Franco scratched behind Sonny's ears, then moved to where I stood. You look beautiful. I'd agonized over what to wear before settling on a deep burgundy dress that Teresa had assured me struck the right balance between festive and appropriate. Franco's hands settled on my waist, pulling me close. I'm terrified, I admitted quietly. What if they hate me? Impossible. But even if they did, it wouldn't matter. You're here because I want you here. Because you're part of my life now. He pressed a kiss to my forehead. Besides, Vincent already told half of them about the commission meeting. You're practically legendary. Vincent had recovered fully. The only reminder of his injury, an occasional stiffness when the weather turned cold. He'd started dating one of the nurses from the private facility where he'd been treated, much to Franco's amusement. The doorbell rang, signaling the first arrivals. Within an hour, the townhouse was filled with people. Older couples who regarded Franco with obvious affection, mixed with younger cousins who treated him with careful respect. Children ran through the hallways while adults gathered in clusters, switching between English and Italian with fluid ease. Franco kept me close, introducing me to what felt like dozens of relatives. His Aunt Rosa, a formidable woman in her 70s, studied me with sharp eyes before pulling me into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and garlic. "So, you're the photographer," she said in accented English. "Franco talks about you constantly. Very unusual for him. I hope that's a good thing. He's been alone too long. Needed someone to remind him there's more to life than business." She patted my cheek. "You do that. I see it in his face." Vincent arrived with his girlfriend, a petite brunette named Maria, who immediately bonded with me over our shared experience of being outsiders entering this world. We stood together near the fireplace, watching Franco move through the room with practiced ease. "He's different with you," Maria observed. "Vincent says he hasn't seen Franco this relaxed in years. The feeling is mutual." Dinner was a loud, chaotic affair around a table that had been extended to accommodate 20 people. I sat between Franco and one of his younger cousins, a college student who peppered me with questions about photography. Sonny had positioned himself under the table at Franco's feet, occasionally emerging to beg shamelessly from various relatives who couldn't resist his golden charm. After dinner, as people dispersed into smaller groups throughout the house, Franco took my hand and led me to his study. He closed the door, muffling the noise from the party. "I have something for you. For Sonny, technically, but really for both of you." He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a leather collar, beautifully made, with brass hardware that gleamed in the lamplight. But it was the engraving that made my breath catch. Sonny Pellegrini Collins was etched into the leather, along with both of our phone numbers. "You hyphenated his last name," I said, my voice unsteady. "He belongs to both of us, has from the moment he jumped into my car and refused to leave." Franco's dark eyes held mine. "I know we haven't talked about the future formally, about what this is or where it's going, but I need you to understand something, Megan. You're not temporary. Neither is Sonny. You're family now, in every way that matters." I set the collar down carefully and moved into his arms, pressing my face against his chest. "I love you. I should have said it before now. But I was scared. Of this world. Of what it means to love someone in your position. But I do. I love you, Franco." His arms tightened around me. "I love you too. Have since you stood dripping wet in my car, apologizing for your badly behaved dog who was actually showing better judgment than either of us realized." We stood there for a long moment, holding each other while the party continued outside the door. Eventually, we returned to our guests, but something had shifted. The last barrier between us had fallen. Later that night, after everyone had left and Teresa had finished cleaning up despite my offers to help, Franco and I sat in the living room with Sonny between us on the sofa. The dog wore his new collar proudly, having posed for approximately 30 photos, while various relatives cooed over him. "Your family was wonderful," I said, curled against Franco's side. "Especially Rosa. She told me about your mother. She was my mother's best friend. Helped raise me after the fire." His fingers traced patterns on my shoulder. "She approves of you, which is significant. Rosa doesn't approve of anyone easily. Vincent seems happy with Maria. He deserves it. Not many people would take a bullet and never question the decision." Franco was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about next steps. The business needs someone who understands both the legitimate operations and the other aspects. I want to gradually transition more toward legal enterprises, and I'd like Vincent to eventually take over the rest." "You're thinking about getting out?" "Not completely. That's impossible. But minimizing involvement, yes. Focusing on the import business, the real estate holdings, building something that doesn't require constant vigilance against people like Vittorio." He looked down at me. "Building something stable. For us." The implication hung in the air, heavy with possibility. A future where we could be together without the constant shadow of danger. Where the biggest threat might be a difficult client, or a rained-out photo shoot instead of rival families and territorial disputes. "I'd like that," I said softly. Though I have to admit, Sonny might be disappointed. He's gotten used to the attention from your security team. As if understanding, Sonny's tail thumped against the sofa. Franco laughed, the sound rich and genuine. And I realized this was what I'd wanted from the beginning. Not the wealth or the protection, or even the intensity of his focus. Just this, Franco at peace, surrounded by the people he loved, building something that could last. Outside, snow had started falling, coating the city in white. Inside, we sat together, a family formed not by blood but by choice, by a golden retriever's inexplicable devotion, and two people brave enough to love each other, despite every reason not to. It wasn't the life I'd planned 3 months ago when I'd chased Sonny through that rainstorm, but watching Franco smile down at our dog, feeling the solid warmth of him beside me, I couldn't imagine wanting anything different. We'd found each other in the chaos, and somehow, impossibly, we'd built something beautiful from it. And that was more than I'd ever dared to hope for.